Maybe if you pay. We're here to celebrate in Mass today the story of a man who lost his marbles. My dad as a kid, his marbles rolled out onto Houston Street. His foot was run over and mangled by a truck. Now that should have been the end of this story, but at the time, the only option was amputation of the afflicted limbs. But a doctor passing through St. Vincent's Hospital tried a revolutionary procedure, reconnected the veins and arteries in his foot, and allowed my dad to walk today. Otherwise, I'm sure I might not be here. At the age of 8, my dad uprooted us from Staten Island. We grew up in one of the most interesting places a kid could ever experience, Greenwich Village, a neighborhood divided by Houston Street. On one side, a revolution was taking place, hippies, yippies, Hell's Angels. On the other side of the 4-lane thoroughfare, an Italian neighborhood steeped in an earlier generation, a throwback in time, steeped in culture, oblivious to the outside world, a city within a city. As a kid, my dad took an interest in woodworking. He built radiator covers, protecting people from being burnt while providing a decorative piece of furniture. My dad was a woodworking virtuoso. He could look in a magazine, see a piece of furniture. He would then build the tools the people of that era used to construct the furniture, to build a reproduction. He had no schematics, nothing, no previous experience. Me, I thank you, I can't even put a nail in a wall. Living in the village, there we were, all living in a 5th floor walk-up in the village. My grandmother, my aunt, Joey, Jimmy, and me. And on the same floor, 2 more aunts and 2 uncles. My brother Joey slept in the same bed as my dad well into his teens. They say the only reason he ever got married was so that he could have his own bed. We grew up pretty dysfunctionally happy, or we just didn't know any better. Dad worked a lot. I appreciated the rare occasions we spent time together. I remember every movie he brought me to so I could have some culture. Planet of the Apes, The Russians Are Coming, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Cat Ballou. He made sure I read the finest publications, The Hardy Boys, Famous Monsters of Filmland, Creepy, and Cousin Ghoulie. He brought me an 8mm film projector with films like Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Wolfman. I was being schooled to become the new Einstein. Our 5th floor kitchen was like Church Central growing up. My grandmother and aunts ran the bingo, the raffles, the St. Anthony's 10-day street festival. I knew how and where to bargain for the best plush toys and Cupid dolls wholesale before I was 10. Dad got a country house in Lake Carmel, New York, on top of a mountain surrounded by dairy farms at the time. It was my favorite. No one knew my dad was an amateur woodworker, had no previous experience, because he could build anything. He sided the house, built elaborate rock gardens and landscaping, built 2 Olympic-sized pools from a picture in a book. He built this massive, beautiful rock wall that lined the property single-handed, somehow moving bulldozer-sized rocks with a pinch bar and brute strength, while frying the suspension of 2 station wagons in the process. One day in the local Putnam County newspaper, the local farmers were complaining in 2 separate townships that their cows were taking to the local streets because of the missing section of rocks in their pasture walls. They never figured out where those rocks went. We were normal kids growing up. We were clueless. We thought the neighborhood mob guys who were called back then the boys were the good guys, because the cops were always shaking down the local candy stores and the gambling establishments. My brother was always being escorted home by the local cops. Me, I was too fast. I could slide out a window and slip through an alley. Jimmy, well, he was too busy with the Lower East Side girls. My father was very generous as a father. He gave me $5 a week allowance in the days when it cost me $10 a week to ride the bus to and from school. But if I complained, he would go into the living room, come out a few minutes later, hand me the paper with all the messenger jobs circled. Dad bought me my first shoe shine kit as a kid. I was going to be rich. I went down to the local subway station. The most valuable lesson I learned as a new businessman was don't put brown shoe polish on black shoes. There was no instructions. To the waterfront where we are now. Eventually that day comes when you attempt to follow in your dad's footsteps. Dad brought us all down to the waterfront. Never having a waterfront pass, I worked Piers 8, 10, 12, 23rd Street, Piers in Brooklyn, the Columbia Street coffee warehouses, Piers A and B in Hoboken, Port Newark, Port Elizabeth. I drove huge stackers in my 20s through the streets in Brooklyn in the wee hours of the morning, accidentally pulling down power and telephone wires when an assorted set of oddballs named Lazy Vinny, Mikey Two Fingers, GB, Fat Eddie. I painted, accidentally, on a newly opened Verrazano Bridge when the truck I was driving lost 155-gallon cans of yellow and green paint along the bridge's span because Mikey Two Fingers forgot to tighten the chains. I eventually, because of the ripping of the guys on the pier every morning, switched over to become a port policeman. That's a glorified pier guard. So I could go back to college, till I finally lost my waterfront pass. The charge that they got me on was unauthorized use of a Xerox machine. That's true. Jimmy became a mechanic because of his tool and die background and eventually worked on the new cranes coming into the port. Joey worked with a bunch of guys who would have made the world's finest mental institution check their patient inventory to see who was missing. Now, I watched my dad work his progress because I was down here those years. He was promoted from a plan clerk. And for those of you who don't know, a plan clerk is a guy who's like a ship's interior decorator. He lays out where all the cargo goes so the ship will stay balanced in turbulent seas and not capsize. He was promoted from that position because the captains of the ships so trusted his judgment and skill. They would write letters to the company only wanting him to lay out the ships, only feeling safe when he had done it. He laid out exactly where the cargo would go. I watched him as he became more and more noticed in the industry and began to climb the ranks. In those early days, there was no insurmountable job or problem that arose on the piers that my dad couldn't figure out a solution to. He surrounded himself with some of the most oddball characters I ever met. Tommy Ryan, a man with one wife, 17 girlfriends, and 437 kids. Pier superintendents who would scream till they burst an artery, but they would always get the job at hand done and on time. All oddballs, lunatics, people no one else would ever touch, people no one else could control, all geniuses in their own right, all intensely loyal to him. He gave everyone a chance. He always recognized untapped talent. The waterfront was changing due to containerization. The industry was going through growing pains. Dad loved it. He could go with the flow. He could make anything work. After leaving the waterfront in Pittston Stevedores, he founded the first American-based shipping company for Spanish Line. In one company, he took control of all the work that was being outsourced, saving the company millions and forcing tighter controls, have everything run more efficiently. I learned everything from watching my dad. I learned you could do anything. When everybody had your back up against the wall, Dad showed that nothing was not possible, even if it was never done before. He had such an incredible belief in himself that he accomplished the impossible in impossible times. Now, he married his second wife, first is right there, Mom, Veronica, Natalia. For the first 10 years, I didn't know it was English she was speaking. My dad and her raised her sister's little girl, Coralia, while her parents were part of the resistance in the war in Nicaragua. My dad, even after retirement, continued helping friends, still consulting for the shipping industry. Dad retired for a whole moment in time. Then he started projects, making stained glass, building my hypnosis offices, teaching seminars. His wife, Natalia, passed on over a year ago, a great loss. We're here today to celebrate with this man a life, a legacy. Now, if you look back at Ronald Petrocelli's life, he's a man who comes from a family that believed they could make anything work, any project, big or small, any person. They had such a belief in themselves, or such ignorance that they didn't know as to what was possible, that they proved there's always possibility, there's always a way. You could accomplish anything. That's what my dad gave me. It's driven my life and has touched many of yours. When I look at my clients, my patients over the years, the experiences they had and what they missed out on, not growing up in a family like mine, I feel truly blessed to have him as a dad, to have everybody in this room as friends and relatives. Thanks, Dad.